bottom line.
Welcome to the Pay Mode edition of the Payments Podcast. I'm Bottom Line Managing Editor Owen McDonald. This series of Pay Mode themed podcasts looks at the hottest trends in business payments with Paul McMeekin, Vice President of Marketing at Bottom Line, along with expert guests. In this episode, Paul welcomes Ken Ouimette, Head of Supplier Experience and B2B Payables at JP Morgan. They explore improving processes in the new era of business payments efficiency, among other pressing topics for 2026. Here's Paul McMeekin and Ken Ouimette.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Payments Podcast in our special Pay Mode series. Today, joining me from JP Morgan is Ken Ouimette. He's the Head of Supplier Experience and B2B Payments. Welcome, Ken.
Thanks so much for having me.
Before we go to the questions, can you just give me a quick background of your role today and what you do with the bank?
So I am head of our Supplier Experience organization and B2B Payables products. That means that we have a lot going on. We have responsibility for helping our clients to optimize and monetize their payables. We have teams that are reaching out to suppliers to try and engage and get them enrolled in those preferred payment methods. On top of that, we also have a series of B2B payable specific products that we are deploying to help meet our clients' needs.
Excellent. Okay. So first, real question. From your perspective, Ken, speaking with all of your different customers across the country, what is the hidden cost of manual process in the treasury and finance organizations?
Yeah, there's quite a bit. And so many clients mention that, the manual processes that they have often lead to a lot of time that are spent on low value added tasks. So if you think about tasks like data entry or reconciliation and report generation, there's a recurring theme around those types of processes that consume a lot of energy and are not of the greatest value addition to what a client would be wanting to work on. We hear an awful lot about errors as well through those manual processes. So these can come in the form of missed payments or overdrafts. Worst case scenario could be regulatory issues. And these things crop up more often when there aren't tools and automation capabilities that are in place. One treasurer in particular that we spoke to recently shared that his team has experienced and continues to about $15 million in ACH payment failures on an annualized basis. And a lot of that is often due to outdated or incorrect vendor information. Again, it's manual keying in information inside of their ERP, errors that are being incorporated as part of that process, and that holds up the transmissions.
$15 million, you said?
Yeah. Now, that's not in cost. That's in the quantity or the spend associated for those payments, but it's quite substantial when you think about that, right?
And it causes a bunch of rework on the back end and
Absolutely.
doing it all again, right? Yeah. I cut you off, forgot to talk there. What about risk?
Yeah. Well, that's another area that comes up an awful lot. It seems like it's coming up more and more these days. We hear about internal fraud risk that comes up on the parts of our clients, especially when approval workflows aren't automated or maybe roles aren't as clearly defined as they need to be. And keeping vendor details current can be a challenge for a lot of teams as part of that process and just tracking down the remittance information for vendors. But that's also a source of where internal fraud can take place as well. So that is very real.
Diving deeper into one of the areas, receivables, what's the real cost of receivables in an environment of high interest rates traditionally compared to the last 10, 15 years and fluctuating interest rates, right? And even thinking beyond just interest rates of incentives and payment term expansion.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in there, and that's a really great question. I hear the opportunity cost of capital come up much more so these days than probably in previous years. We hear it in relation to when payments are delayed coming in on the receivable side and companies have cash that is tied up obviously and can't be deployed elsewhere when they're waiting for those kinds of payments. I like to say the struggle is real when it comes to thinking about working capital, the strain that places on customers on the receivable side. And it especially is apparent as interest rates fluctuate as payment terms continue to expand. It's not unheard of at all for us to be hearing that payment terms are extending by 30 or 60 days beyond what they historically have had. And the other piece that I think that has an impact on is that the credit risk can go up for clients the longer that receivables sit unfulfilled. So it has a lot of impacts in a lot of different ways, and I think that one of the levers that can help customers on the receivable side associated with that is obviously thinking about ways in which they can automate accounts receivable and get those payments in faster.
Stepping back and think broadly more outside of receivables, what are the KPIs that a CFO should focus on? So when you go and meet with these companies, what advice do you give them?
Obviously, there's a lot of KPIs that CFOs and treasurers, I think, are mindful of when it comes to the focus on working capital efficiency, and conversations that I've had and that my team has had. We hear of metrics that come up that are pretty common around the cash conversion cycle. So, I mean, days sales outstanding, days payable outstanding. Those come up an awful lot. One that I'd like to see, it does come up, but I think that it would be one that would help companies come up more often, is in tracking the ratio of automated versus manual processes as a mechanism of measuring progress along the lines of improving that working capital efficiency.
Switching topics slightly, it's a little bit more forward-looking. When you're going in talking to these companies and they're starting, maybe not from scratch, but they've got some automation in place, what's the blueprint for modernizing the payments environment?
Well, I just mentioned the importance of tracking automated processes, right? And I think that's obviously the best way that comes to my mind for how you're looking at modernizing a payables environment is automating the payment lifecycle, inclusive of initiation through workflows and reconciliation. That to me seems to be a common and critical way for companies to really modernize their environment. The benefit on top of that modernization through automation is oftentimes it can be accompanied with payment methods that incorporate rebates as a value add back to a client. And again, those KPIs that are being measured, I think, are critical to ensuring that customers that are on their modernization journey are achieving their needs or achieving that expectation. One other thing that I'll mention too is that I've seen at a pretty tactical level, I've seen customers struggle with different components of how they're managing their payables. And again, it's when automation comes into play. So if companies, we've seen companies that have had several different acquisitions, they're managing out of several different ERP systems, and they're forced to use different processes, different payment files for managing their overall payables environment. And a lot of times that creates bottlenecks or inefficiencies. Certainly, it makes it more challenging for reconciliation across the whole. So again, it's another area where I think automation on the back end can help to make things much more seamless, much more manageable, much more trackable.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. If you could give one piece of advice to CFOs, treasurers about the future of payments, what would it be?
I really start with the importance of having clear prioritization around what is your payment strategy and making sure that the entire organization at all levels are aligned around those priorities. So as an example, for those that are concerned with fraud, obviously there's interest in finding ways of verification and solutions that are going to ensure that vendor information and changes to payment profiles are as accurate as they possibly can, as verified as they possibly can. When working capital is a priority, then optimizing that payables environment is often a component of that discussion. But I think what seems to make the biggest difference is when those priorities are truly embedded throughout the organization at all levels. And my team is working with individuals, whether it's the treasurer or head of finance, or even just the folks that are in accounts payable that have an overloaded plate. It's important that everyone at all levels sees the bigger picture, that they have an appreciation for what the broader organization is seeking to achieve and why, I think that just makes for a much more successful implementation. And we talked about KPIs, we talked about the importance of measuring that, and doing that at all levels of an organization helps, I think, to align the team and achieve success. That's my advice.
It's the classic management theory of each individual knowing where they're going.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
Tying their efforts to the big strategy. Ken, this has been wonderful. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening to another episode of the Payments Podcast.
My pleasure.
Discovering the true cost of receivables and the opportunity cost of capital. Reducing the strain on working capital as interest rates fluctuate. Understanding credit risk and using various levers to help better manage B2B payables. These are all part of the blueprint for modernizing B2B payments in 2026. Our thanks to Ken Ouimette, Head of Supplier Experience and B2B Payables at JP Morgan, and to co-host Paul McMeekin. To our audience, the smartest people in B2B payments, thanks for listening. Hit subscribe. Catch us again on your favorite podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Bye for now.
The Payments Podcast from Bottom Line.